other people join to make sure that they're admitted. But again, thanks for everybody that was able to join the call today. This is the Delane Lean Business Agility monthly webinar and community of practice. And this month's theme, we're actually talking about driving a customer experience in business agility, which is a topic that's very close and near and dear to our heart here at Delane. So again, I'm glad that you guys could be able to join us. We'll go over just a couple of logistics here in a moment. But first, I just wanted to introduce ourselves for those of you guys that maybe have picked us up on LinkedIn or haven't had a chance to meet with us before. But my name is Frank Canistra. I'm a principal consultant with Delane Consulting. And I'll be speaking a little bit about the deep dive today on how to ultimately enable and drive customer experience using different tools and techniques. Along with me on the call, I have Fadi Zachary. He's our VP partner and our business transformation lead with Delane. He's going to get us kick-started a little bit and talk about some of the importance of CX in business agility as well. So that includes what we love to call our award-winning Lean Business Agility Framework, our LBA 4x4, as we lovingly refer to it here at Delane as well. So we'll kind of kick off with a little bit of what that is and definitely how important CX is to being successful with Lean Business Agility efforts. Okay. But before we begin, just a couple of quick logistics. First of all, just so you guys know, we will share a copy of the webinar recording. So if there's anything that you found helpful or just want to listen to a second time, we expect to have that posted up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. But I will circle back with a PDF copy of the slides as well. We have a lot of good references and some extended reading towards the end. So I definitely want to make sure that you guys get a chance to live into the CX arena a little bit further. But before we kind of dive in here, just want to make sure everybody's clear on what we try to do and achieve via this forum. We do run these monthly, totally free, and we want this to be a public judgment-free zone for you guys to just sit back, relax, learn some new things, but definitely ask some questions and seek guidance. So we'll make sure that we carve some time out at the end as well. But in addition to that, we mix it up. So every month there's a new theme. This month, again, we'll be digging a little deeper into customer experience and demoing some cool techniques and ways that you guys can live and breathe that within your own organizations and your teams. But we also want this to be an opportunity to help build a community. We know there's a lot of webinars out there, so we appreciate you guys jumping on this one with us today. So we certainly hope that you not only build and foster a relationship with our great Delane team, but this is an opportunity as well to kind of just network and hear some ideas and thoughts from other people around the industries as well. So again, goals are just kind of share some helpful tips and some demos. Definitely help and provide some enriching foundations for discussions and get some stories from you guys as well about things that have worked in the field. And then ultimately, this is a great way for us to kind of engage with you guys. So again, welcome and glad to have you on board. Just a couple quick disclaimers. Due to the fact that we do have different people from different companies and organizations on the call, we would just ask you guys to be mindful when you share stories or ask questions. It's discretion. Full discretion, make sure that you're ensuring that any information you share is maintained in accordance with your company's policies, that you're being confidential and not sharing customer information. I think most of us would know that at this point. But as I said, we do like to record these. There are a lot of folks, we understand things come up. They might want to refer to these, or maybe they couldn't join the live session. So we'll make these available on our YouTube channel as well. So again, I think that's it for formality. So we'll go ahead and get it kicked off. And I'll hand over the reins briefly to Fadi so he can tell us a little bit more about our Delane LBA framework and how customer experience factors into that. Are you ready, Fadi?
Thanks, Frank. Thanks very much for the introduction. Thank you, folks, for joining our webinar for today. We always like to start with putting our framework as the very first slide, so we bring the attention back to our promise of achieving business agility through these pillars. We call them the 4x4 of business agility. So no matter how difficult is the journey, we promise you, if you follow these 4x4, you will be able to navigate all the obstacles in the journey. So today's focus is customer experience, and Frank is going to touch on the how do we achieve it. He's going to also touch on how or where we achieve it throughout the journey and where they kind of fit in the framework. The main point that I want to kind of bring before I bring it back to Frank is related to the importance of customer experience. And when we mention customer here, we're not really only talking about an end customer. We're talking about everyone who's gonna participate in this journey to achieve business agility. That can be an employee, can be a leader, a certain executive, can be a stakeholder, and obviously can be a customer who's going to use the eventual product that we're developing using our development engine. Okay, so obviously customer is the main focus, but it can be also, like I said, an employee. So and that's why we are very kind of keen to develop this community, because this community is going to bring a lot of expertise to say, how would an employee in a certain environment kind of experience building and being part of that development life cycle, and what would that employee kind of witness in terms of automation, becoming more of a digital in a digital era more than traditional. So all of these would factor in the experience to internal users and external customers as well. So the main point that I want to kind of touch on is it is not difficult but challenging to achieve best customer experience. It is not difficult because you can achieve it once or twice with the right tools, with the right mindset, with the right guidance from support agents. You can achieve a good framework that will enable you to provide or cater for better customer experience. So Frank is going to talk about journey mapping, personas, you name it. Okay. I'm not going to get into the details because Frank is going to mention them, but my point here is you can achieve it, and you can achieve it correctly for a few times. But the real challenge is to sustain it long term. Okay. Again, I'm talking about an experience, whether it's going to be to the end customer or an internal customer, such as a colleague of yours, an employee of the company, regardless. Okay. How do you cater for repeatability and sustainability of a good customer experience? Using a framework or tools is a big part of it, and I'm going to leave this for Frank. But the one tip that I'm going to give to you here, folks, is creating a forum for with friendly users. So we've done this for a Fortune 15 company, right? And we help them achieve the right level of customer experience attention across their product development lifecycle. But there was always the challenge, okay, I did it right for this product. The next product, do I have to do it all again? How would I find the customers whom I'm going to reach out and engage in that design of my experience? How would I do that? So there was always a challenge of how we reach out to these customers. So what we achieved and worked around this big challenge was to build a forum. You call it whatever you want to call it, a friendly user forum, a voice of the customer forum, a customer experience forum, regardless. But the whole point is create one place where product owners, developers, customer experience specialists in your organization will reach out to, okay, to gauge the experience, run stuff by them, okay, and provide their feedback, demo some code or some functionality that is completed. So there is always that one forum that is easy to schedule and easy to engage. That tip alone provided significant improvement in terms of repeatability and sustainability. So I just wanted to share this with you folks here before I turn it back to Frank to dig deeper into the methodology of customer experience. So that's it for me, Frank.
Great. No, I appreciate it. Good summary, and thanks for not stealing my thunder too much with showing some of the cool stuff. But I think, Fatty, the major point that you said is, customer experience is critical. Yes, it can be challenging, but when we talk about business agility, it definitely applies to a lot of different quadrants, or in our case, pillars. Under cultural transformation, there obviously is a huge cultural aspect that Fatty's alluding to with voice of the customers and creating that sense of community. But in addition, we talk a lot about business agility and what the agile mindset is, and how it's a catalyst to really drive a lot of these things. So customer experience definitely pulls in from the agile mindset and making sure that you're building, enabling the right culture. From a product development lifecycle perspective, certainly the more involved you are with your customer, and we'll look at some quotes that really kind of piggyback this concept as well. But when you design a solution, when you design a product, it's very important to keep the customer in mind and understand what their journey is and their pain points, and gather that feedback early on. In addition, once it comes down to delivery, managing the customer experience and managing expectations is super critical. Stakeholders are customers too. And again, as Fatty mentioned, there could be cases when it could be internal colleagues, it could be product owners. So are people tracing back to the bigger vision? Are you managing and driving transparency, which also contributes to a great customer experience? And last but not least, I love when Fatty talks about sustainability, because, again, it's not always just a tool or a person or a certain solution that will ultimately fulfill your needs. It's a combination of things, and building those in a sustainable fashion as well. So when we talk about digital transformation, and we're fortunate enough to have a couple of folks on with us today that dabble in data migration, data automation, those kinds of things, keeping the customer in mind and partnering with them to do things like test case automation and DevOps and those things, and transforming them digitally, working smarter, not harder, as a lot of us say, it's definitely critical. And the whole community aspect is you're going to see that as a recurring theme as we dig a little bit deeper over the coming slides as well. So again, Fatty, thanks for the summary there and the kickstart. But before we kind of really dig deeper, I wanted to kind of flash a couple of industry trends that I came across that I thought really personify how important and what a hot topic customer experience is today. So again, a couple that I found that were really interesting is there's an analyst, Brian Solis, who did a survey. 93% of senior executives said that CX, or improving it, is actually one of their top 3 priorities over the next couple of years. So again, I think just for face value, that really shows that when we talk about things, especially like digital transformation, which is another hot strategic objective we're seeing with a lot of clients these days, it's not uncommon to see CX carved out as one of the strategic pillars or themes that executives are looking to really build out or evolve. So I actually expect that the 93% will continue to climb, but that really kind of gives some weight and gravity to the fact that a lot of senior leadership teams are starting to look at CX as a key driver for strategy. In addition, I found this great quote on superoffice.com from Stephen McDonald, who ultimately said that it's not only an exciting opportunity for years to come, kind of resonating with the previous quote, but that the companies that are starting to focus on that now will not only kind of see some of the loyalty, but they're going to experience reduced churn and increased revenues, which ultimately puts more dollars in companies' pockets. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about advocacy, customer retention, customer management. But at the end of the day, happier customers usually translates to time savings, cost reductions, and potentially more money in your pocket with a larger customer base. Moving over to the right, a couple other ones. This really great quote from Ben Davis was talking about how the digital customer experience is becoming a key differentiator. And he kind of makes it synonymous with brands and product and price. So again, that kind of further gives some more gravity to the fact that CX is now standing on its own 2 legs. It's very important to kind of have big companies, enterprises, to kind of factor that in from a very strategic high level. But one of my favorites, I actually just took a recent flight from Chicago, so ironic timing. They have this magazine called Hemispheres, and the CEO, Oscar Munoz, he had a great quote in there talking about their app. And if you guys, I'm not trying to pitch United, they're not putting miles in my pockets or anything, but I am pretty loyal to United. I think they have one of the best apps in the market. But it was interesting because he was talking about how they're starting to iterate on a more consistent basis, and they're really trying to put customers first and foremost at everything they do. So they're doing things like a better boarding process. They've created these really great United Polaris sky lounges for international flights. So it was interesting to see that, and I quote, they're putting the customer in control and at the center of everything we do, which will ultimately translate to great experiences for everybody involved there. Right. So again, just want to kind of give you guys a little flavor of what the industry is saying, but Before we kind of go even further, I know a lot of you guys have probably heard of what CX is or what customer experience is. But from Wikipedia, which is usually the source for good definitions, in commerce, CX is the product of an interaction between an organization and a customer over the duration of the relationship. So that can mean a couple of different things, but in essence, it ultimately breaks down to how a customer perceives your product. And I like this follow-up quote from SAS, where they kind of talk about the aspect of conscious and subconscious reactions. What are customers and how are customers approaching and feeling about our products when they use them? And getting into more of the advocacy part of that, what do they think when they're not using them? If you look at Apple or Android, some of us obviously favor one or the other, but when we're not using our phones and we're not using our devices, how do we feel about that brand? And ultimately, are we inclined to talk about our relationship and ultimately drive more customers? But in a nutshell, I found this really great quote from Gartner that I think sums up how to manage and ultimately start driving it. And they say that it's the practice of designing and reacting to customer interactions to not just meet but exceed customer expectations, which I think is critical. So, again, we've talked about some of the value in why CX is important. They obviously think that customer satisfaction, loyalty, and advocacy are top of the list. But when we kind of look around the web and we kind of draw on our personal experiences working with clients, there's a whole host of reasons or valuable drivers as to why CX does matter and why it should be at the forefront of a lot of what we do. So again, as we've kind of alluded to, it definitely helps strengthen your brand preference through these experiences that you offer to customers. There's certainly the opportunity to boost revenue with incremental sales, being hopeful that existing customers will kind of translate their experiences to new customer acquisitions by speaking positively about the brand and about their experience. So customer loyalty factors heavily into that, and that's kind of where we talk about advocacy is, as an iPhone user, if I really enjoy my experience, there's a chance that I'm talking about that. And that could in turn put more money in Apple's pockets because maybe my mom, they might be looking to buy a new phone, and based on my experience, they're very interested in what I have to say. So into that, we talked a little bit about this opportunity to lower costs by reducing customer churn. Customer retention is a key component of customer experience as well. It's not just about attracting and engaging new customers, but what steps are you taking to keep those customers happy and make sure that they're not walking with their wallets out the door? But a couple of things that we wanted to call out too that I think make CX very important. Customer expectations are higher than ever, and they're rapidly changing. And I think, again, you guys might have drawn this from some of the industry quotes we looked at, but due to things like social media, due to things like just watching news and walking into Apple stores, very nice environments that they create, customers come to expect a great experience, stem to CERN. So they are becoming more empowered. They are becoming more connected. So for all these reasons and more, that's why we feel that CX is super important and it should be a critical part of your strategy. Okay, so in a nutshell, again, while we kind of called some of these things out, just to make it super obvious, is that all of these things and more things that aren't listed, when you have a great CX experience and when you focus on making a powerful CX strategy as part of your vision, it can certainly not only increase customers, but increase your customers' loyalty and customer satisfaction. While there is the opportunity to reduce costs, you certainly see ways where customer experience does translate to more customer acquisitions and possibly incentivizing different services and different channels. But in addition, and something that I think is sometimes not stated and with equal weight, is the fact that if you create and focus on driving a great customer experience, there's usually opportunities to reduce time to market, to reduce service time. We're seeing a lot of automation in the customer service space, which is just one aspect of customer experience. So, again, just kind of summarize and package it nicely. Doing some of these things will help will help realize a bunch of benefits across the board. Okay. So with all that being said, we saw some trends and we heard a little bit about why CX is important, but ultimately we wanted to kind of break down some of the key components to make it more livable and breathable for everybody. So in a nutshell, there's really three distinct areas when you look at the broader practice of customer experience. A lot of industries, a lot of companies focus on the three primary quadrants, if you will. So the first one is engagement, which is ultimately, the attracting of customers, how people perceive and respond to your brand, the overall messaging, your mission statement, ultimately what you're about, and they want to feel good about that. But hopefully, once they buy into your ecosystem and they procure your services and products, the whole aspect of usage comes into play. So how are customers feeling when they're actually using your products? Are they having a great user experience? Are they finding things too confusing or clunky? So, usage is one of the key areas as well when you think about CX. And last but certainly not least, we talked about, how do we avoid, that customer churn? How do we make sure that customers are staying with us and that we're monetizing those relationships? So, managing the relationship is just as important. And ultimately, this is going to be one of the driving forces behind a customer's decision to, stay and possibly give you more revenue, more advocacy there, word of mouth, or leave. And again, I think we're seeing a lot of churn due to the constant flux of technology and changes in the market. But driving a great customer experience strategy in each of these quadrants will help you not only engage and attract customers, but ensure that they're happy while they're using it. And then at the tail end of that, making sure that they're staying and that you're keeping those customers happy. So all of these three things, when we look at them holistically, in summary, it's about knowing your customers, finding ways to make them feel special. Establishing benchmarks is something that's really critical to kind of realize, the success of your CX strategy or find opportunities to iterate and improve. But ultimately, you want to be able to show that you're willing to take action. Are you providing the right information in the right place? Customers do expect, and again, partially due to social media, but our customers are becoming more empowered. They are aware, and the more that you include them, the more that they feel like you're taking their feedback and acting on it, improving products and pushing out updates on a frequent basis, then the happier that they're ultimately going to be. Okay. So, again, wanted to put some context out there on the what, whys, and hows. But now the real meat of it is how do we really enable this, and how does it complement our business agility efforts? So we came up with a list, and by no means is this an all-inclusive list, but these are some of the key things that we're seeing in our client engagements, and definitely doing some independent research. There's several different ways that you can enable customer experience in your own right. And top of the list is, as you guys may have picked up from some of the industry quotes, it is important to have some kind of a vision and strategy when it comes to customer experience. So, we are seeing a lot of successes for companies, enterprises, and teams that are establishing a clear vision and strategy and including that as part of their strategic theme or objectives when they tackle new acquisitions and new projects. But more importantly than that, I think is, what steps are they taking to really understand who their customers are and some of the emotional and mental factors that drive them to their products and services. So it's super important to create that emotional connection. As we've kind of discussed, making things feel personal, making sure that you're interacting with the customers, things like gathering feedback and gathering it real time, which again, social media is something that we touch on a lot, but you're seeing a lot of success with companies that are creating those channels where people can ask questions and they can do customer service, in a way that's meaningful for the customer. But, all in all, we talked about timeliness and transparency. We talked about aligning the customer expectations. But, what are we doing to kind of make sure that those things are tightly in sync with the way that we're developing the products and solutions? And again, Fadi talked a little bit about this earlier as well, but, it's not just about attracting customers and defining your processes, but are we showing that we're acting regularly on their feedback? Are we, working in an iterative fashion? And this includes both customers and employees. So I think that was an important call out that he made earlier as well, is that sometimes, customer experience, it typically is associated with external customers, with the purchasers, the people that are buying and using our products and services. But employees are customers too. So, I think it's important to kind of call out and establish, what are you doing to reach and target those external customers and keep them happy? But likewise, it's also important to kind of, work with your own employees, gather their feedback and make sure that you're acting on that. And last but not least, we talked about the importance of realizing your return on investment when you deliver great customer experience. So there's certainly some opportunities to benchmark and create some ways to monitor that and see its success. So in essence, again, we kind of talked about some ways to enable, but how do we actually do that? And here at Delane, again, not an all-inclusive list, but we kind of broke it down into 3 different areas based on everything we've looked at and talked about today. So first up is understanding your customers and steps that you can take to kind of walk in them hand in hand and do a better partnership and really understand what drives them and who they are and where they experience pain points. So the immediate things that come to mind, and we'll dig into some of these examples shortly, things like journey maps, customer personas. And you guys on the phone, you may have heard about some of these things before, but in essence, this is going to give us a great mechanism to kind of define what our target customer is, some of the things that motivate them. In addition, when we talk about journey maps, are we just coming up with a solution because we feel like it's the best thing? Or are we really kind of walking step by step with that customer and saying, you know what, from the time that they research and ultimately purchase something to all the way downstream to the customer service aspect, we really understand what they're dealing with, what they face. So it's important to kind of really establish and understand who your target customer is via personas. But in addition, if you understand the journey, it's very easy for you to create a product and solution that really meets their expectations and needs. Okay. The next section down, we want to kind of make sure that, you know, in addition to understanding that, we're continuously connecting with customers. So again, you guys may have noticed that's a recurring theme as well. But we do this a couple of different ways. And for us, you know, the product ownership role, you know, Fatty talked about this as well. But internal to companies, it's super critical to have people on the front lines that are actively doing the stakeholder, the customer engagement, making them feel like they're a part of, you know, early discovery phases. Sometimes we still call those like assessment activities, where we want to really gauge, you know, how do we approach this? What are some of the driving forces behind the solution or product before we start doing the work? So the product owner is a great way to do that. And again, you don't need to necessarily subscribe to an agile framework or method like Scrum or Kanban. But if there's an opportunity to kind of peel back some of the layers of what a product owner typically does, then I think there's a lot of benefits that you or the organization or client would be able to achieve by recognizing that. So we'll dig a little bit into that as well. And next over in the connecting with customers quadrants, we talk a lot about surveys. And you guys online may have seen NPS, which stands for Net Promoter Scores. It's a really, really simple metric, easy to deploy. I'm seeing this a lot in social media circles as well. But essentially, you know, what are you doing to kind of make sure that you're continuously connected with customers and that you're tapping into those customers' experience to kind of say, hey, you know, things are going great, or, you know, they have some ideas on how to do things better. The MPS in particular, it's a very specific type of question that basically says, you know, how likely are you to recommend this product or service to somebody else? So usually we kind of look at that as a scale from 1 to 10, where 9 and 10 would kind of be like, I'm super excited to recommend this product to a family member, to a friend. So using something like surveys or more specifically an MPS gives you a very easy metric to say, you know, you guys are doing well with your product or services, or maybe there's an opportunity to do better and create more advocates with your current customer base. And last and certainly not least, we talk about gathering feedback and taking action. So, you know, at the tail end of the day, we want to make sure that we're understanding who our customers are, that we're, you know, continuously in sync with them, that we're always connected with them. But in addition, we want to make sure that we're gathering their feedback and acting on that. And when we look internally, when we kind of reflect with some of our internal team members and stakeholders, retrospectives are a great tool and technique. Again, this comes from the Agile circles. You don't need to be practicing Agile day to day to do a retrospective, but the concept is simple. You know, at interval, every couple of weeks after a sprint, once a month for a program level, maybe even quarterly, you know, are you guys taking opportunities to gather people together, gather customers together in a safe zone maybe, and figure out, you know, what's working and what's not working? What should we start doing or stop doing to ultimately drive more satisfaction? And Fatty kind of mentioned the voice of the customer as well, abbreviated to VOC. This is typically a very similar kind of panel, whereas retrospectives are more at the end of an effort, where you want to kind of capture how did we do for this previous sprint, this previous iteration, this previous life cycle. Voice of the customer can happen anytime, but it's usually most beneficial in the early discovery phases of projects as well, where you kind of gather stakeholders together, you gather some of the key members, people that'll be, you know, both supporting the product and maybe even some users, some real users that might be testing the product. And understanding how they feel and getting some initial feedback will help you take action, avoid some of the pitfalls we see with, you know, waterfall style projects, but also make sure that they feel like they're partnered with you throughout the effort, which is super important. All right. So again, what I just wanted to kind of establish some of the different areas and mechanics and techniques, but we'll dig a little bit deeper. And I'm glad to say, just to pause for a moment, at the end of the presentation, which again, I'll share via PDF, we have a couple of great samples and extended reading. So for things like MPS, and even what we're gonna look at now for personas and journey maps, we have a couple of samples. So we definitely don't wanna leave you guys empty-handed, but it's something that you guys can certainly gel on and ultimately find ways to incorporate in your own day-to-day processes or with your clients as well. But just as a starting point, we wanted to talk about customer personas and journey maps. So in summary, these are really important for business agility for a few reasons. Ultimately, it will help teams and organizations better understand and identify who their target customers and users are. And again, as we've established with some previous points, the more and better that you understand your customer, the more likely it is that that customer is going to have a great experience from start to finish, which is super critical for a lot of initiatives. But in addition, especially when we talk about the personas and journey maps, we want to be able to trace through some of the key steps and the potential optimization points from their perspective. So we want to walk a day in their shoes, so to speak, and we want to make sure that when we're creating the product or solution, that we know some of these different integration points, some of these different contact points that they're going to experience, and what are we doing at all steps in that process to make it a super great experience, again, from stem to stern there. So ultimately, one of the ways that we can do this is we can create personas and journey maps in the early solution discovery phases. And I also kind of mentioned this, but inviting target users and customers, which I know isn't always an option for some clients and some customers, but if you can, if there's any ways to incorporate them early in things like empathy sessions, which is very similar to some of these customer forums, understanding the customer, getting them involved with pilots, getting them to do some user testing, are going to be a really great way to kind of gather some feedback up front. So, again, the goal here is, you don't want to get halfway through the life cycle of a product or solution and realize this is nowhere what the customer is wanting or expecting. So the more you can kind of incorporate that early on and do some of your homework, usually it'll translate to a lot of wins across the board. But on the right, you'll see this is just a sample. And again, totally encourage you guys to hit up Google and look for some samples. There's tons of them. But this is something that we use during training, and we use it with presentations. But essentially, this is an example of what a customer persona sheet looks like. So typically, you might see things like, who they are and the title. And again, this is all a sample. So the goal is just to kind of role play a little bit and say, if I was a CIO, what are some of the things that drive me? What are my attitudes towards innovation and technology? Do I collaborate with peers? What's a day in the life of the CIO like? And ultimately, the goal here is to identify and extract some of the key motivators in addition to the pain points and some of their needs, because then it'll give you a better handle on designing a solution or a product that works for your target group. So again, this is just one sample, but personas are really helpful when you want to make sure that the product you're creating is specifically targeted towards the user. And there's cases where, again, from a generational perspective, from a hierarchy kind of perspective, there's cases where maybe the product or solution you're creating needs to be slightly more tailored to a certain group or demographic. So personas can certainly help with that. And related to personas, we also look to deploy a lot of journey maps, especially with our discovery activities with clients. Again, this is just one sample. You may see some that look more like an actual roadmap or like a game board from start to finish. But in a nutshell, a customer journey map is just that. You want to map out the customer's journey from start to finish. And when we say start, it's usually what are they doing to learn or get educated about your product or services, so that early engagement piece. And then all the way at the tail end of that, they might need help or they might need support. So, what are you guys doing when you create a product or solution to kind of keep these things in mind and say, we want to keep the experience as tight-knit and seamless as possible, but it's also helpful to kind of understand some of these key pain points or integration points or questions they might experience. And ultimately, maybe that drives how you design an interface or a product or a cell phone mobile app. So, a lot of these things are really critical, but in the early discovery phases and when you're trying to create products and solutions, we found a lot of success personally using customer personas and journey maps. So, and again, we'll provide a copy of these in the appendix as well. So you guys will have a sample, but more than willing to jump into Google and you guys will find a lot of good research material as well. So next up, we wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about keeping that connection with the customer and the active engagement. And for us, one of the key roles that we really try to drive with our business transformation efforts is the product owner role. So when it comes to product ownership, again, I don't want to assume that you guys have these kinds of roles today. I would hope that it's a term that you've heard before. But in a nutshell, they're responsible and accountable for what we call the product backlog. So that's literally the list of requirements that the customer or stakeholders are expecting you to provide. So the product owner has the unique ability of, doing that outreach, making sure they understand, what the customer, what the stakeholders are looking for, and helping enable the teams, the development teams, to make sure that they're delivering the maximum value on that return. So partnering with this, the product owner typically owns the prioritization. They're responsible for helping do some of the stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. So transparency and ensuring visibility with the customers and stakeholders is critical. But in addition, usually, as you guys may have found, it can sometimes be painful, and this isn't meant to be, offend anybody, but it can be painful when you have decisions by group or by committee versus centralizing and focusing the voice of the customer through a single point of contact. So for that reason, the product owner typically is the one that does a lot of the legwork and reaches out with those customers, taps, their wants, their needs, their desires. But having that single voice can really help the development effort and keep things on track. So a lot of responsibility for the PO, but very, very well warranted, and it provides a lot of value to your development lifecycle. So ultimately, as a product owner, how do they drive and enhance the customer experience? So again, a few things that they can do. They're definitely the ones that usually take the lead on discovery and some of these empathy sessions, meeting with the customers and stakeholders. Again, by no means do we want to assume that you guys are practicing Agile or doing some of the Scrum stuff where product owner is a defined role. So there are cases when you can certainly have other people like PMs, Scrum Masters assist with this, but in general, having the product owner build that relationship out usually provides a lot of benefits there. So they're typically the ones that lead a lot of discovery and empathy sessions and activities. In addition, we talked about this, but the product owner does not really dictate how the dev team works, but they do provide instructions on what the dev team should be working on and making sure that their work traces back to the bigger mission, vision, and strategies, which is ultimately important for customer satisfaction. And last but not least, again, we kind of really talked about, what are the ways that we're making sure that we're showing that we're capturing feedback, but responding to that in a timely fashion. So the product owner usually takes the lead on helping articulate any problems that may emerge in a development lifecycle with stakeholders, and vice versa. Sometimes customers change their mind. We all do that. Sometimes I think I want a burger and I wind up getting a grilled cheese instead. But if you don't have that person that's in touch with the customers who's being receptive and responsive to the changes in the customer's attitude, it makes it very difficult for the development team to kind of assume what they should be working on. So that's a critical thing, is making sure the product owner has that frequent contact with customers and that they're trickling that back down and then also back up from the development team's efforts. So again, I just wanted to summarize a few things that make the product ownership role, why it's important, and ultimately what they do to help drive and enhance customer experience. But to the right, you'll see we actually broke it down a little bit further for you. Things like defining the vision, anticipating client needs, owning the requirements and backlog, representing the customer, and evaluating progress. Again, at a high level, these are a lot of the areas that usually fall in the product owner's wingspan. But at the end of the day, it ultimately boils down to a lot of the things that we talked about, which is understanding your customer, knowing their needs, anticipating their needs, making sure that you're being open and transparent, and above all else, when not just gaining buy-in from the stakeholders and customers, but building trust. And again, I think a lot of folks on this call, you guys may have been picking that up, but customers want to trust and know that the products and brands they're using are really the best fit for them. So the product owner has a lot of responsibility, but ultimately it's very important for them to continue to work on that relationship. Okay. And just to kind of wrap up some other examples of ways that we can further, leverage and incorporate CX into our day-to-day practice. We talked about retrospectives and surveys and voice of the customer. These are all just different forms of feedback loops. So, again, we want to make sure that we're making ourselves not just readily available to the customers, but that we're also kind of showing that we're open and available to them, and that we're acting on their feedback. So feedback loops are certainly important for knowing our customers well and building that trusting relationship. Obviously, maintaining the direct line of contacts with our internal, external customers is paramount there. But this gives you a good pulse to kind of say, the market's changing, the customer demands are changing. So having some kind of feedback loop via one of these methods is really critical for making sure that you're in touch with the customer as things change and as the market changes. But in addition, something that hits really close to home for us is feedback loops provide you with a really great way to identify and continuously strive for improvement opportunities. So again, I would hope that most folks on the call, day to day, we always want to be conscious of things that we can do to make the whole process better. The same is true with customer experience. So having retrospectives, having surveys, these provide great forums for you to gauge your customers and then ultimately, refactor and act on that feedback. So, don't sit lightly on some of these feedback loops, but they're really great to kind of create some of that cultural, continuous improvement that we really look for. So again, just to kind of get a little more specific, when we talk about things like retros, those are a forum that we would usually conduct after every sprint, after every iteration of like a product, after a big milestone. The goal here is ultimately to identify with the core team members and sometimes the users as well, what can we start doing or what should we stop doing for future iterations or future releases. So that's one of my favorite Agile ceremonies. But again, even if you're not doing Agile, the act of just retrospecting and reflecting on what can be changed is a great practice to implement. In addition, something as simple as surveys, we've used things like SurveyMonkey, Google Forms. If you guys are using, Google Corporate Suite, there's a lot of really easy ways these days to create both internal and external surveys to both gauge how you guys are doing from a development perspective, but then also, has the interest or appetite for your products or services changed at all? So when we think about surveys, I mentioned this briefly, but the Net Promoter Score, the NPS, it's a really simple metric. It's that 1 to 10 where you really want the customers to come in and tell, are we going to recommend your product, yes or no? If they rate highly on that, that's usually a good benchmark or KPI to say, what, the customer's doing some of the advocacy for us. They're very happy with our product, good enough to kind of rate us really high. So incorporating surveys and NPS is really important. And then last but not least, the voice of the customer. And these could be, standalone interviews. These could be cases where, within the product owner or within some of your arenas, are you guys going out to your internal stakeholders? Are you reaching out to customers? Are you creating forums? I know that there's some market research firms out there that do this for a living, but ultimately the goal is to create that safe zone so you can enhance your understanding and take that feedback from the stakeholders, the users, the customers, and make sure that you're incorporating that and backing that into your process. So all in all, again, these are just a few different methods for feedback loops. But to the right, we kind of call out the retrospectives are really the best mechanic for the internal team feedback, for driving a little bit of that agile mindset, coming up with process improvements. When we think about voice of the customer forums, it's great to really build trust early on and get those customers engaged and make sure that you're getting the feedback from your target user groups. And then with NPS and surveys, a little bit more flex here, but these can be really great for baselining advocacy. Also a great feedback option as well, especially when you're looking at some of the public users out there. You want to engage them on social media and so forth. But when you want to improve your reputation, improve your brand, as simple as NPS is, it could be a really great mechanic for you to do that and be conscious of how your reputation is perceived. All right. So in summary, guys, we're going to open it up to a little bit of discussion, but just to kind of wrap up here, again, I hope you guys saw some different mechanics. If you didn't hear something new today, my hope is that maybe there's a couple of new things you did pick up, or maybe you're a little more inspired to take some of these things and try them out. But in a nutshell, customer experience really starts with building and gaining trust. We've said that a few times, but ultimately the more people trust you and your products and services, the more they're going to come back in the future and hopefully tell their friends and family about it as well. And CX, it's definitely a part of staying agile and responsive to customers. So even if you're not practicing capital A Agile by the book kind of stuff, it's really important for you to stay nimble and make sure that you're responding to customers. But the cool thing about CX, I think, is that it can be addressed during all phases of the ideation and delivery lifecycle. So when you talk about delivery, obviously, upfront, you want to make sure that you're discovering the right solution and delivering the expectations of the customer, but all the way downstream as well. You want those customers to spread word of mouth, to kind of get out there and do some of the marketing for you. So there's really opportunities to incorporate better CX practices across the board. And at the root of all of these, being empathetic, focusing on the relationship, really some of the key foundational drivers. But the best part is, again, we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but, the more that you kind of double down on having that clearly defined strategy and vision, the more helpful and beneficial it's going to be. But any steps that you take, any baby steps you take to incorporate better CX practices, you will definitely realize some return on your investment. Don't need to benchmark that. I know it's a bold statement, but there's opportunities where you can survey. There's opportunities where you can get customers involved. That's never a bad thing. So again, it's one of those things that we're hearing a lot more about. But the good news is that if you're not really doing it today, or you don't have a focused CX strategy or vision, that's okay. There's a bunch of tools in the toolbox that you guys can leverage to start driving a better experience. All right. So again, I want to thank you guys. We'll kind of wrap up with a couple of resources towards the end. But I wanted to first just, I'll unmute the lines. And, no obligation, no pressure. But for anybody on the phone, I'm curious, you guys have any CX stories or experiences to share? Any tips or suggestions? Of course, any questions or comments are also acceptable, but just curious for anybody on the phone. You guys have anything that you found to be helpful, or any stories where you've done some of these things? Don't be shy. I promise I won't volunteer anyone, but okay. And any last questions? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just this has been. I was just going to say, in the CX side of the house, one of the things that I'd like to emphasize is that it also is get the channel involved in terms of, in many places where you have indirect channels. There's this linkage where you have to look at extending through partners to an end user, and we've done some extensive partner engagement surveys and partner, trying to interview what's the best experience, customer experience. So I think one of the things that companies make errors on is just going right to this consumer and not looking at what's the total partner experience. They'll look at the experience for that customer through the eyes of their brand versus the other players in the ecosystem. And what's the other way too is that sometimes we look at the end user and we think, well, it's our partner's fault, without realizing that the support we're providing to the partner to get that to the end user isn't there. So CX as, I think that maybe a future topic is, how do you extend, understand the customer experience when you've got a complicated ecosystem. And so one of the dynamics that we need to focus on, that I've always wanted to focus on, is really understanding the whole ecosystem focus and impact on CX. And it's not just, it's not just the brand you have to your end user, but it's also, in factors that people in your whole touch points within the delivery that impact that CX, and getting to that's going to be pretty.
Yep.
But you won't know that unless you really get in and understand deep into the CX what they truly feel about the ecosystem. And so, monitoring your questions and doing the voice of the customer, and really digging in and asking follow-up questions and all that to get there is very critical. So while NPS is good, and while other external ways of measuring it, I think the true value is in getting to the next level, and then truly understanding what the customers are trying to, what they're really experiencing from the whole solution experience versus just their perception.
Yep.
Bilateral. It is usually a multilateral experience.
Agreed. Yeah, and digging deeper is always going to provide you with that best, richer level of feedback. I think that's totally great feedback, Ben. Appreciate you sharing, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, guys. Anybody else before we do a quick wrap up? Any questions, comments, thoughts? No? All right. We're going to appreciate everybody joining us today. Just as a quick +1, we'd like to kind of share some upcoming events And I know there's a few big ones that we at Delane will actually be at, but the Business Agility Conference in New York, that's a really, really great forum for us to connect. In the past, they've featured really great speakers that talk about a lot of what Ben said too, not just the customer experience and some of the surveys, but digging deeper and really kind of understanding the ecosystem and how we're seeing things like Agile and HR and some of these, I want to say, like very difficult or complex arenas where now we're seeing a lot of people innovating in that space. So really great conference. There's a Gartner Data and Analytics Summit, which is a really great one as well. So that's coming up in Orlando towards the end of March. Of course, being selfish, would love for you to invite you guys back to our next Delane monthly webinar. That will be it's last Tuesday of every month. The next theme is going to be enabling an agile mindset. So we're super excited to talk about some more ways that we can be more agile in our day-to-day. That'll be March 26th. And then for any fellow fans of Jira, or even if you're not willing to be convinced, Atlassian runs a really great summit. Their next summit is actually happening in Las Vegas from April 9th to the 11th. So that's another one if you're really big into working with delivery teams. And also some of the more delivery kind of aspects of the life cycle, that should be a great one as well. Okay. So last but not least, guys, we will share this via PDF, but I know that some of the concepts we touched on today were a little high level. So if you're unfamiliar with things like Net Promoter Score or running retrospectives, have some really great resources for you guys to kind of learn what those are and kind of see if it's something you guys want to deploy or try out with your clients or with your engagements. In addition, though, found some really great reading, voice of the customer methodologies, found a good article on Forbes for some CEOs sharing how they're actually focusing on culture to really enable and drive customer experience. I think that kind of feeds nicely into some of Ben's comments as well. But in addition, you heard me plug a lot about social media. Whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. But there's a lot of great ways that companies are using social listening to benchmark their CX and realize their success with customer experience as well. So I'll share this so you guys can kind of check some of it out. Feel free to share. If you guys want to connect with us, feel free to hit up our website. We're pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. And last but not least, again, we appreciate you guys joining these webinars. They will always be free. Feel free to invite your friends, tell your family if you want. But we do also offer corporate individual training sessions as well. So we have the pleasure of working with the wonderful Sophia on our team. You guys are welcome to contact her if you guys want some more individual focus time or some corporate training for Agile, Jira, or things that we offer as well. So check out our website for more. But again, that'll conclude the call for today. Just want to thank everybody for joining and hope to see you next time. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon. Bye.
You're welcome. Take care, guys.
Take care.